The automatic doors of Seattle General's emergency room slid open with their familiar whoosh, but tonight that sound carried something different. Something heavy. Nurse Sarah Mitchell looked up from her station, her trained eyes immediately assessing the scene before her. A man in his 50s, red-faced and sweating, was dragging his 20-something son through the entrance like a sack of potatoes. The younger man wore an army t-shirt that looked too new, too pristine. His jeans were designer. His sneakers cost more than Sarah's monthly car payment. But it was his eyes that told her everything she needed to know. They darted around nervously, avoiding direct contact. The look of someone who knew he was about to be caught in a lie. "We need help now," the father bellowed, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the ER. "My son has PTSD. He served his country, and you people are just standing around." Sarah moved toward them with the calm efficiency that came from 12 years in emergency medicine. But those 12 years in civilian hospitals were just the second chapter of her story. The first chapter was written in blood and sand, in the mountains of Afghanistan, where she'd earned a call sign that still made hardened operators go quiet with respect. "Sir, please lower your voice," Sarah said, her tone professional but firm. "I need you to bring your son to triage so we can assess. Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice." The man stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that would have been threatening if Sarah hadn't faced down Taliban fighters with nothing but a sidearm and a prayer. "My boy served 6 months in Kuwait. He has nightmares. He needs medication, and he needs it now." Sarah's eyes flicked to the son, who was now sitting in a wheelchair that he clearly didn't need, playing on his phone. 6 months in Kuwait. A support role, by the look of him. Nothing wrong with that. Every position mattered. But the theatrical performance, the demand for immediate narcotics, the entitled attitude, these were red flags she'd seen too many times. "I understand your concern," Sarah replied, maintaining her composure. "Let me get his vitals and medical history." "And medical history? He was in a war zone. What more do you need to know?" The father's face was now purple with rage. Other patients in the waiting room had gone quiet, watching the confrontation unfold. Sarah noticed her colleague, Dr. Marcus Chun, approaching from the corner of her eye. Marcus had been a Navy flight surgeon before joining the ER staff. He recognized the look in Sarah's eyes, the look of someone exercising extreme restraint. "Sir, if you could just—" Marcus began. "Oh, great, another one," the father sneered. "What are you, a diversity hire? My son needs a real doctor, not—" "That's enough," Sarah's voice cut through the air like a scalpel. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made everyone in the immediate area go still. "Your son will be seen in the order of medical priority. Right now, I have 3 cardiac patients, a child with a potential skull fracture, and a woman in active labor. Your son's insurance claim for anxiety medication can wait." The father's eyes widened, then narrowed with pure venom. "How dare you? You're just a nurse. What the hell do you know about combat? What do you know about sacrifice?" Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her fingers moved unconsciously to her left wrist, where beneath the long sleeve of her scrubs, a small tattoo was hidden. A Navy SEAL trident. Earned, not bought. Below it, in letters so small only she could read them, Angel 6, Helmand Province, 2012. "Ma'am," the son finally spoke up, his voice whiny and entitled. "I really need something for my anxiety. The VA won't give me what I need, so your doctor's shopping," Sarah stated flatly. "The answer is no. You'll be evaluated properly, and if medication is warranted, it will be prescribed appropriately." "This is bullshit," the father exploded. "You think you're better than us? You think because you wear scrubs you understand what warriors go through?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the automatic doors burst open again with such force that they slammed against their stops. The chaos that entered was organized, military precision wrapped in civilian emergency. For paramedics, pushed a stretcher at a controlled run. On that stretcher lay a man in his late 40s, his gray t-shirt soaked with blood, his face pale but conscious. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's world stop spinning. Those eyes found hers across the crowded ER, and something passed between them that transcended time and distance. Recognition. Disbelief. A connection forged in the deadliest mountains on Earth, where she had pulled him from the wreckage of a downed helicopter while under enemy fire. Angel 6, the man on the stretcher whispered, his voice barely audible but carrying across the sudden silence like thunder. Angel 6, you're alive. The clipboard in Sarah's hands clattered to the floor. Commander James Riker. SEAL Team 3. The man she'd cut from a burning helicopter while Taliban fighters closed in from 3 sides. The man she'd kept alive with nothing but combat gauze and sheer determination, while calling in an airstrike danger close to their position. The man she'd been told had died 6 months later in a classified operation in Syria. But here he was, bleeding from what looked like a training accident, staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, her professional composure cracking for the first time in years. She was moving before her brain caught up with her body, pushing past the angry father, past the fake victim's son, reaching the stretcher as the paramedics rolled it toward Trauma Bay 1. "Commander," she said, her hands already assessing his injuries with practiced efficiency. "Abdominal wound, not arterial. Probably a training knife that went too deep. Survivable, but he needed surgery soon." "Sir, can you tell me what happened?" "Training exercise gone wrong," Riker managed, his hand shooting out to grip her wrist. His fingers found the tattoo beneath her sleeve, feeling it through the fabric. "Sarah, we thought. The explosion in Kabul. They told us you were later." Sarah cut him off, her voice professional again, but her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Right now, you need surgery. Dr. Chun." Marcus was already there, taking vitals, barking orders. But his eyes kept flicking between Sarah and the bleeding SEAL commander, putting pieces together. Behind them, the entitled father had followed, his son trailing behind like a forgotten afterthought. "Excuse me, we were here first. My son needs..." "Sir, step back," one of the paramedics said firmly. "Don't tell me to step back. This is discrimination. My boy is a veteran, and he's being ignored for some." Commander Riker's eyes, despite his pain, locked onto the complaining father with the kind of stare that had made enemy combatants surrender without a shot fired. "That woman," he said, his voice gaining strength. "That woman you just disrespected. She's the reason 37 Marines are alive today." The ER had gone completely silent. Even the child who'd been crying in the waiting room had quieted, as if sensing the gravity of what was about to be said. In 2012, Riker continued, his hand still gripping Sarah's wrist as she worked to stop his bleeding. "Our helicopter was shot down 15 clicks behind enemy lines. Pilot dead on impact. Co-pilot died in my arms. I was trapped in a wreckage with a broken back and a sucking chest wound." Sarah tried to shush him, to tell him to save his strength, but he kept talking, his voice carrying to every corner of the emergency room. "This woman," he nodded towards Sarah. "Corpsman 3rd Class Sarah Mitchell, call sign Angel 6, ran 300 meters through active enemy fire to reach our position. She cut me out of burning metal with a knife and her bare hands. She sealed my chest wound with her own hands pressed against the hole because she'd run out of combat gauze." The angry father had gone pale. His son had stopped pretending to have anxiety and was staring with his mouth open. When the Taliban got within 50 meters, Riker continued, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face, she put herself between them and me. She fired her M4 until it ran dry, then switched to her sidearm. She held that position for 43 minutes until air support arrived. Marcus had stopped working, his hands frozen mid-suture. Other staff members had gathered around, transfixed. "But here's the part you really need to understand," Riker said, his voice getting stronger despite his injuries. "When the medevac bird finally came, there wasn't room for everyone. 3 wounded SEALs, for wounded Marines, 1 Air Force JTAC. The pilot said one person had to stay behind or the bird couldn't take off." Sarah closed her eyes, not wanting to relive this moment. Sarah took off her vest, her helmet, and her weapon, and stepped off that helicopter. She stayed behind, alone, in enemy territory, because she determined that every person on that bird was more critically wounded than she was. She stayed behind so that we could live. A nurse in the corner had started crying. The angry father looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. It took 6 hours for the next extraction team to reach her position, Riker continued. 6 hours where she hid in a dried riverbed with no weapons, no radio, and a dislocated shoulder from pulling me out of that helicopter. When we finally got back to her, she'd evaded 2 Taliban patrols and had walked 3 kilometers toward friendly lines with no boots because she'd given them to a wounded Marine. Sarah was working on his wound with trembling hands now, trying to focus on her job and not on the memories flooding back. They gave her the Navy Cross, Riker said softly. The citation is still classified because of where we were and what we were doing. But I can tell you this. She earned it in ways that would make your blood run cold and your heart swell with pride. The father's son had started to cry. Real tears this time, not the fake distress he'd been displaying earlier. "I'm sorry," the young man whispered. "I'm so sorry." But Sarah wasn't looking at them. She was focused entirely on Commander Riker, her hands steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. "You're going to be fine, sir," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The wound is clean. Dr. Chun will take you to surgery, and you'll be back on your feet in 6 weeks." "Sarah," Riker said, his voice urgent. "They told us you were killed in Kabul. The memorial service. I was there. I spoke at your memorial service." Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment. "The explosion at the embassy. I was supposed to be there. I was delayed. Got caught in traffic helping an Afghan family whose car had broken down. When I arrived, the building was just gone. 14 people died that day," Riker whispered. "We thought you were one of them." "I couldn't tell anyone I'd survived," Sarah said quietly. "The mission I'd been working on, the network of informants I'd built. If the Taliban knew I was alive, they would have hunted down every person who'd helped us. I had to stay dead. I had to let everyone think." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus cleared his throat. "We need to get him to surgery now." Sarah nodded, stepping back, her professional mask sliding back into place. But as the gurney started moving toward the operating room, Riker's hand shot out one more time, catching hers. "Angel 6, he said, using her call sign like a benediction. "It's good to see you again." "It's good to be seen, Commander," Sarah replied, her voice breaking on the last word. As they wheeled him away, Sarah turned back to face the waiting room. The angry father and his son had shrunk into themselves, looking smaller somehow. The other patients were staring at her with a mixture of awe and respect. "Your son," Sarah said to the father, her voice gentle now, "will be evaluated by Dr. Patel in about 20 minutes. If he genuinely needs help, we will provide it. But we will not be bullied into dispensing medication inappropriately. Not because we don't respect veterans, but because we do." The father nodded, unable to meet her eyes. His son had buried his face in his hands. Sarah walked back to her station, picked up her fallen clipboard, and tried to steady her breathing. But her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally hitting her system. Marcus appeared beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "I will be," Sarah said. "It's just seeing him again. I thought he was dead. They told me Syria. The operation in Syria was classified," a new voice said from behind them. Sarah turned to find a tall man in civilian clothes standing in the waiting room. He had the bearing of military, the kind you never lose, even in retirement. His eyes were kind but sharp, assessing. "Captain Richard Morrison, retired," the man said, extending his hand. "I was Commander Riker's CO in Syria. The operation that everyone thought killed him was complicated. He was injured badly, but we managed to extract him. The cover story was necessary for operational security." Sarah shook his hand, feeling like she'd stepped into a dream. "How did you know?" "I didn't," Morrison admitted. "I'm here visiting my daughter. She's in labor upstairs. But when I heard the commotion and heard your call sign mentioned, I had to come down." He looked around the ER, at the staff who were still processing what they'd witnessed, at the patients who couldn't stop staring at Sarah with newfound respect. "Angel 6, Morrison said, his voice carrying that same reverence Riker had used. "Your legend is still told in SEAL training. They use your actions that day as a case study in courage under fire. Every corpsman in the Navy knows your story, even if they don't know your name." Sarah felt her face flush. "Sir, I just did my job." "You did so much more than your job," Morrison corrected gently. You sacrificed yourself so that others could live. That's not training. That's character. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a card, pressing it into her hand. When you're ready, there are people who would very much like to know that you're alive. Not just Riker. The families of the men you saved. The Marines who made it home because of you. They've been living with your ghost for years. Maybe it's time to let them know that ghosts can come back. Sarah looked down at the card. It had a phone number and a simple message. The Brotherhood never forgets. As Morrison walked away to check on his daughter, Sarah sank into her chair at the nurse's station. Around her, the ER slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Patients were called back. Doctors moved between rooms. Life continued. But something fundamental had shifted. The secret she'd been carrying, the identity she'd buried to protect others, had been exposed in the most unexpected way possible. Doctor Chin sat down beside her, his expression thoughtful. So, Navy Cross, huh? That's incredible, Sarah. Why didn't you ever mention it? Sarah looked at her hands, at the small tattoo peeking out from beneath her sleeve. Because I didn't do it for recognition, Marcus. I did it because those men were my responsibility. Because leaving them behind wasn't an option. Because she paused, searching for the right words. Because that's what we do. We take care of each other, even at the cost of your own life. Marcus said quietly. Especially then, Sarah replied. The angry father approached slowly, his son leaning on him for real support now, not the theatrical performance from before. Ma'am, the father said, his voice humble. I owe you an apology. A profound apology. I had no right to speak to you that way. To anyone that way. Sarah looked up at him, seeing not anger in his eyes anymore, but shame. Real, genuine shame. I accept your apology, she said simply. And your son should see Dr. Patel. Not for pain medication, but for real help. If he's struggling with his service, with transitioning back to civilian life, there are resources that can help. Real resources, not quick fixes. The young man nodded, tears still streaming down his face. I'm sorry I lied. Everyone expects me to have these war stories, and I don't. I did paperwork in an air-conditioned office. I never saw combat. I'm not a hero like you. Sarah stood, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be honest. Service comes in many forms. Well, you did matter too. But lying about it, using it to get things you don't need, that dishonors everyone who served honestly. I know, the young man whispered. I'm sorry. Then make it right, Sarah said. Get the help you actually need, not what you think you deserve. And stop letting your father fight your battles for you. The father flinched at that, but nodded. You're right. We both need to do better. Dr. Patel called them back then, and they disappeared into an examination room. Around the nurse's station, the staff was still processing what they'd witnessed. A young nurse named Kelly approached hesitantly. Sarah, that story, what the commander said, is it all true? Sarah nodded slowly. Every word. Why didn't you ever tell us? Kelly asked. We've worked together for 3 years, and I had no idea that you had done, because it's not who I am now, Sarah said gently. That was a different life. Here, I'm just a nurse. I take care of people. I do my job. I don't need recognition for what happened in Afghanistan, because that's not why I did it. But you're a hero, Kelly insisted. Sarah shook her head. I'm a survivor. The real heroes are the ones who didn't make it home. The pilot who died on impact, trying to protect his crew until the last second. The Marines who fought despite their injuries. The JDAC who called in airstrikes, knowing it might bring fire down on his own position. Those are heroes. I just did what any of us would have done in that situation. But even as she said it, Sarah knew it wasn't quite true. Most people wouldn't have run toward enemy fire. Most people wouldn't have given up their seat on a rescue helicopter. Most people wouldn't have sacrificed themselves for others. But that's what separated those who served from those who simply existed. That willingness to put others first, to face death without flinching, to stand between the innocent and harm, even when it cost you everything. 3 hours later, Commander Riker was out of surgery. The operation had gone smoothly, Dr. Chin reported. No complications. He'd be on light duty for 2 months, but he'd make a full recovery. Sarah visited him in recovery, standing in the doorway uncertainly. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, more human somehow. The legendary SEAL commander who had led countless operations, who had been her hero in so many ways, was just a man. A man who had been through hell and, somehow, kept going. "Come in, Angel 6, Riker said, his voice hoarse from the anesthesia. "Or should I call you Sarah now?" She approached the bed, pulling up a chair. "Sarah is fine, sir." "Then call me James," he replied. "We're well past formalities, don't you think?" Sarah smiled, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "James it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two warriors who had shared the worst day of their lives and somehow survived it. "I spoke at your memorial," James finally said. "I told them about how you saved my life, about your courage, about your sacrifice. And the whole time, I felt like I hadn't said enough, like I couldn't possibly convey what you meant to all of us." "You don't have to," Sarah began. "Let me finish," James interrupted gently. "When it told me you were dead, something broke inside me, because I had survived and you hadn't, and that seemed fundamentally wrong. You were the best of us, Sarah, the absolute best. And losing you, it felt like the universe had made a terrible mistake." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry I couldn't tell anyone I was alive." "The mission, I know," James said. "Captain Morrison explained it to me before surgery. The network of informants, the risk to Afghan civilians who helped us. You stayed dead to keep them alive. That's, God, Sarah, that's so perfectly you." He reached out and took her hand. "But you're not dead anymore. You're here. You're alive. And that means everything." "What happens now?" Sarah asked quietly. "Do I have to go back?" "Well, they want me to know," James said firmly. "Your service is done. You gave more than anyone should ever have to give. You earned the right to choose your own path. If you want to stay here, be a nurse, live a quiet life, then that's exactly what you should do." Relief washed over Sarah like a wave. "I do want that. This life, it's simple, clean. I save lives without having to take them. I help people without wondering if they're going to turn on me. It's peace," James finished for her. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It's peace." They sat together as the hospital settled into its night rhythm, two survivors of a war that never ended, finding comfort in shared understanding. Outside the recovery room, the ER had transformed. Word had spread quickly, as it always does in hospitals. The staff looked at Sarah differently now, not with pity or excessive reverence, but with a deeper respect. They understood now that the calm, competent nurse who handled every crisis with unshakable composure had earned that steadiness in the worst classroom imaginable. The angry father and his son had left hours ago, both subdued and reflective. Sarah hoped they would take the lesson to heart, that they would understand that respect isn't demanded. It's earned. That service isn't a costume you put on for sympathy. It's a choice you make every day to put others before yourself. As her shift ended and Sarah prepared to go home, she found Captain Morrison waiting in the lobby. His daughter had given birth to a healthy baby girl, and his face glowed with grandfatherly pride. "Congratulations," Sarah said warmly. "Thank you," Morrison replied. Then his expression grew serious. "Sarah, I meant what I said earlier. There are people who need to know you're alive. Families who have been grieving. Brothers in arms who never got closure." Sarah nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm ready. It's been 3 years. The intelligence networks I was protecting have either been relocated or have gone aground. The risk is manageable now." "Good," Morrison said, "because the Naval Special Warfare Command wants to correct your service record. Right now, you're listed as Kia. That needs to be changed. And," he paused, "there's going to be a ceremony. Nothing public, nothing that compromises operational security. But the people who matter, the ones who served with you, they deserve to know that Angel 6 still flies." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "When?" "6 weeks," Morrison said. "That gives Commander Riker time to heal, and it gives us time to reach out quietly to the people who need to be there. Will you come?" Sarah thought about it for a long moment. Thought about the life she'd built here, the anonymity she'd cherished. But she also thought about the families of the men she'd saved, living with the belief that the woman who had given them back their sons and husbands had died alone in a terrorist attack. They deserved to know the truth. "I'll be there," Sarah said. Morrison smiled and squeezed her shoulder. "Welcome back, Angel 6. Welcome back." As Sarah walked out of Seattle General that night, the rain was falling softly, washing the city clean. She looked down at her wrist, at the small trident tattoo that she'd hidden for so long. She had been so many things in her life. A corpseman, a warrior, a ghost, a nurse. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she was simply Sarah Mitchell again. Not hiding, not running, not pretending to be someone she wasn't. Just herself. Flawed, scarred, but unbroken. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all. The automatic doors of her apartment building opened with a soft whoosh, and Sarah stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next. Because she had learned the hardest lesson of all in those mountains in Afghanistan. You can survive anything if you remember why you're fighting. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't charging in a battle. It's choosing to live when staying dead would be easier. Angel 6 was alive, and she was home.